between Taleb and Jordan Peterson that I came to very similar realizations that that you're talking about, in that like the survivability of ideas is what makes them true. And I talked about this on the podcast with Shaky, is that in order for something to be true, like in truth requires someone believing it. Like the act of believing is part of truth. So somebody has to be around to believe it for something to be true. In many ways, it's like the problem of a tree falling in the woods doesn't make a sound. Well, exactly. The idea of sound is the incorporation of something, that the sensory perception of something. It's not just a independent physical phenomenon. Is kind of like, I think what that question points to. And I think the same goes for truth. I think the same goes for morality. And I think that, and because it's we're all like these animals that are trying to get from point A to point B. And the thing that allows us to get from point A to point B becomes true at a certain level of granularity, right? And then if enough people believe, if it's helpful enough for enough people from getting to whatever point A to point B that they're working on, then it becomes a generally accepted truth, so to speak.
Exactly. I mean, and it becomes materialistic, because it will be encoded into the genes through the evolutionary process. So, right. So the ideas which you embody, in a sense,
right,
they will be incorporated into genetic material over a large time span. That doesn't mean that you will end up with one type of solution, right?
And this is something that I call, that I conceptualize as epigenetics. I actually have on the board behind me. I'm trying to outline this process.
Epigenetics is a hellhole.
Well, it's so my wife is a geneticist, and she works specifically on epigenetic processes. And like we were talking about them, and I don't really understand them at the genetic level beyond a very, very high level cursory understanding, right? But what I did get out of it is that there are ways in which the machinery that express DNA and say how DNA is going to be activated and produces effects that are conditional on the environment, that get passed down and transported through cell splitting or reproduction or what have you. And that the environment itself through provides a feedback loop to, as you were saying, the physical materials, but it also is doing it the same time from ideas that people have, which is how in some ways these things believe get encoded into the material world, so to speak, as you were suggesting. And there's just a feedback and interplay between the two, where the ideas affect the material and the material affect the ideas. And then whatever other, environment that those things become fit for over time, that we may or may not be able to predict, helps determine the outcome of both. Which is probably the most articulate that I've ever put any of these things out there.
It's great. Let me say something very radically for this let's say beginning part of the podcast. That what you were talking about, the spirit and the matter, right? In a sense, idea and the genetic, independent of its genetic or epigenetic, we might talk about that later. And that is the main idea why all religions, or to put it differently, why God had to become man in Jesus Christ. That is exactly the same idea, because spirit, God, became matter, man. That is the root of religious thinking, where both things basically match. But that was a very, very long-term conclusion from my side. But I really do believe.
And I think that's the same conclusion that Jonathan Pagow, I'm not sure if I'm
I guess
he goes down that route
so.
also. I haven't completely wrapped my head around that one, but I understand it directionally.